The top talents in the comic book business are here to tell everything they know.
Hey, what's going on? Jesse James Comics. I started in comics January 25th, 1982 at the Friendly Neighborhood Comic Book Store in Las Vegas, celebrating 41 years of awesome comic book collecting.
I'm Big Clutch, former SVP of BizDev over at Skybound, a lifelong comic fan, and right now I'm just kind of a freelance guy out here doing some live shows and some content, so thanks for having me on.
Hi, I'm Matt Nelson, huge comic book fan my whole life. I love everything about comics. I'm the president of CGC, and it is a thrill to be here on the show.
One of the things I definitely want to talk about first is, because it's so fresh on everybody's minds, is the con season. Con season feels like it's always one of the things, you know, the ebbs and flows of at least the collector community rides with con season. We're always talking about what's the next cool variant coming out of a con, what's the next cool exclusive coming from a con, you know, where can we all go meet up and hang out. And the last con that we had, big con, was San Diego, and San Diego this year felt absolutely amazing. It felt there was a different air about it, obviously because we don't have the big, you know, Marvel MCU push going on. We didn't have all these actors and you know, I think that brings a crowd of people, and it felt like it was more beneficial to collectors and retailers and stuff. And I've been hearing left and right how it was such a success, and we were all there. Matt was the only one I didn't get to see. How was your con this year, Matt, for San Diego? What did you think?
It was just like you said. It was huge, bigger than last year, because last year was the first one after COVID, because they've been shut down for 2 years prior to that. So last year felt a little flat. They still had, the mask mandates and, a lot of restrictions, I think. I don't know if they reduced the number of tickets they sold, but it definitely seemed kind of flat. And then this year it was like just a flood of people. And, I think part of that was the fact that the actors are not there up in Hall H. And so, all those thousands of people were down on the floor, which definitely fueled it. Because, it was like Thursday it was like Saturday. It was like wall to wall people, not on the other end, only on the other end, but also in the comics area over in Hall A and B. So, it was packed. So it was great. Even, the cosplay was not as prevalent, which was interesting, but it felt more like a regular convention. And that's what everybody kept saying on the floor. They're like, this is great. This is the way it should be, so definitely a different vibe going on.
Yeah, I the first day I met up with Clutch, and we walked around and grabbed the things that we wanted to grab, and it felt exactly that. Like it was a comic book convention again. It felt like it was people were talking about comics. They were talking more about artists and creators. They were going through bins. They were picking up whatever the creators had as their exclusive. I remember we stopped by Coffin Comics, Clutch, and we saw those Nakayamas, and we were just blown away at how beautiful these books are. And we stopped there and we just BS'd and talked to Bryan about how great everything looked, and it was a lot of fun, man. What were your thoughts on the success of San Diego?
Dude, it felt really good. Everyone up and down said they had a better year than years prior, which is really cool to hear, especially on the comic side. And, honestly, like the buzz walking around with you and Leg and seeing just, I don't know, creators just vibing, they were having a good show. They could tell things were energized. When I went back to Coffin Comics booth on like Saturday, and they had sold out of the Polito books by then. And I was like, oh, I'm going to grab another set. Gone. And Bryan was like, just kind of smiled at me. I'm like, dude, I am not mad. I am stoked that you sold out. Like, that is so great. So, and then you saw like with other, publishers and stuff like that, Skybound had a really good show. The guys at Boom, I talked to Josh over there, and they had a killer show. Everyone up and down. And Artist Alley was packed. Like, I popped over there and I was like, I gotta go. Like, my anxiety level went to 11. I was like, this is too many people. I'm out. And that's really great to see, right? Like that there's so many people in that area with the artists, which was awesome. I've been learning a lot, and I'm very thankful that I have good retailer partners and friends who I've made over the years, like Jesse and Chris Rupp, and a lot of these guys who've been able to kind of like impart wisdom upon me, because it's different working. I got to work for a publisher for 12 years, and so at that point I am removed from like the retailer to retailer situations. I'm with the creators, I'm acting on that side, and having to go like, hey, it's sometimes you get a little cutthroat out there, and you're watching guys go back and forth, and it's really tough. And like I mean, it just being able to listen to these guys and have their wisdom kind of come down and follow in the good steps, and that's been a big thing. And Jesse, too, talking about the branding is a really big thing. I mean, Jesse's been, since I first started at Skybound, Jesse was always one of those guys who every year at Comic-Con came up to the booth, was always like, hey, this is my store, I've got this much stuff, I'm looking to get these things. We always found a way to kind of take care of him so he can service his fans back. By the way, also, Jesse, to his credit, was also the guy who would be like, he would get to the show on Wednesday night, buy books at the booth, and he would drive back to his shop in Arizona overnight, so that Thursday morning when it opens up, like his customers are buying comics from San Diego Comic-Con. Like, you can't tell me there's nobody, not even people who lived in San Diego, would be doing that. Like, that was out of this world in terms of like, that is fan service to your clientele and your customers. And I think when Jesse talks about like taking photos with Ross Ritchie and showing like, it's not just like for personal stroke, but it's also just to show like your customers like, hey, like I know these guys, I'm able to work with them, I'm going to find a way to kind of bring them one step closer to you as you're buying the comics on Wednesdays at the shop, right?
Yeah. What was I want to ask Matt about CGC's presence at cons, and what was there a presence of CGC at this year's San Diego, or were you just kind of there, Matt, as a comic fan this year?
Oh, no. Yeah, CGC was definitely there. Yeah. We've got two booths. We've got one in the end with the, all the other dealers. And then we have the Signature Series booth at the other end. They're both jam packed, for different reasons, obviously. Oh, we had, it was huge. I mean, we were, we tried to streamline it because, crowd control has been an issue for years. Certainly prior to COVID, things have been a little bit more manageable since COVID. But a show like San Diego is difficult because the aisles are, pretty narrow. We don't really have, like at Heroes, we were like way back in the corner, and we had like all this space. In a lot of shows, like New York, even we've moved more to the front of the show to have more space around us. But in San Diego, you really don't have that option because everything is pre-sold out years in advance, and everybody's in the same spot they are every single year, at least in our area. And so you really don't have a choice. You're kind of, you're crammed in there. And so all these people are at different times during the day, coming by to drop stuff off. So it was good. The social media is like so noisy and so depressing sometimes. And it's nice to get out of the bubble and go to a show like San Diego, especially San Diego, where the energy is like, off the charts and everybody's having a great time. And they're so glad to be there, and they're at the booth, and they're just, good thing. Just, it's a good vibe. And so that was, it's kind of refreshing to step out of the bubble and be like, okay, this is good. Everybody's, this is good. So, but yeah, we were jam packed, all weekend. Yeah.
What's it like for you personally? Are you, helping out with logistics, or are you a face at the table? What's it like for Matt being at San Diego?
Yeah, kind of the face. Yeah, it's a little embarrassing because they got like a big TV screen behind the booth this year, and they put like, come meet Matt Nelson, the grader, at 1:00, and I'm a big face, and I'm just like, God, it's embarrassing.
So we have a team of graders at CGC, and our job is to basically just grade books all day long. So my job is to obviously oversee that and make sure that we achieve consistency and we're hitting our targets every day.
I talked with Comix president Matt Nelson, otherwise known as the grader.
But no, luckily I don't, I'm not, back in the day before CGC, which was only, 10 years ago only. Going to shows with Steve Ritter or set up with Bob, Schluppenbox, doing, I did all that for years. So I will say the one good thing about CGC is that, it's a big enough operation that the crew comes in, they set it up and they go. So I'm lucky that, at this current juncture, I get to, just kind of show up, but I'm at the booth, I'm doing, screening several times during the week, or just hanging out, helping certain times, popping in and out. People need to meet for, whatever reason. So, other than that, I'm just floating around in the general area, talking with, collectors and dealers that I see every year. So it's a, big networking is a big part of it.
Hey, Matt, can I ask you a question real fast on and I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to hear what your answer is. Having so many computers on the table where a person can just walk up, is it to eliminate that paper trail there, or is it just to say it just makes sense now to do it that way?
It makes sense a lot of levels. Yeah, paper trail's one, or the second thing is the ease of putting it in, the accuracy. It's all instant. It's it's done, because paper besides the waste, it has to be put into a computer by someone else. So just cutting all the steps out down to where the person's actually entering it themselves in the booth. Yeah, and so we found that it goes much quicker and cleaner. So that was a big
technology at this show was a big eye opener for me in a way that it's never really been that eye opening. Like it's been in the forefront, but not as eye opening as it was this year, because it was so easy to pay for stuff, whether it was the Shopify app, the Square app, whatever it is. For most people, I used the Shop app for a lot of people because that's what they were using, and it was you didn't have to put your name in each time. If you did it once, it was very easy. And the technology has made everything really streamlined, at least in the payment processing part of things, which is a big deal, especially for retailers, right, Jesse? I mean, that kind of was
well. I will tell you this: I've never had a year where I went with cash and then I had to run over to Wells Fargo to deposit it so that I could actually pay someone. It was. You never really think about it, right? You get home, you kind of do your taxes, and you said, okay, I spent 10 grand, right? Now you got receipts. I mean, it's literally like, oh, okay, I spent $9,823.65. Wow, crazy. It is tad frustrating at first, and as you get to the 10th table and the person's like, oh no, we don't take cash, right? I talked to Philip over at Boom, and I kind of asked him the question, and it wasn't what would you say, protecting your money basis. It was just a smart thing to do, right? And so I think technology, I was one of the first people that Square came to and said, hey, if we do this for you, will you leave PayPal? And I thought, well, okay, but PayPal is PayPal, right? And then you got into this new company who realized, well, we could do this and we can make this user-friendly, convention-friendly, right? They would always ask me, how do you do conventions? How do you take payments? And I would explain it to them, and they'd say, well, what if you did it this way? What if you made it a little bit more easier? And so I think not only has technology been awesome, it's allowed you to promote with that receipt, right? So they get the receipt, and the receipt says, hey, come back, you'll get 10% off your next purchase. Or in my case, the customers gain points, right? So they got to spend more money to get more points to get their, $3.50 off. But I think with technology in the comic book world, we have to really understand comics is kind of Jurassic, and it's always been Jurassic, right? We talk about how we direct market now in social media, yet 30 years ago, Malahai was doing direct to mail in 1970s comics, right? So it just takes us longer to get up to date. But I think having technology has changed the way I do business. It allows me to provide a great comic book therapy to customers, to know that no matter where they are in the world, everything is easier to use, because a transaction, at the end of the day, the two most important things in sales is the transaction and delivery, right? So if you're selling online, it's the delivery to the customer, but it's also that transaction point. Okay, we've talked about this. It's $125. Here you go. Oh, no, you don't have to put your card in, just tap it, right? Or use your watch, which people are using watches now. So technology has been great, and I think we need to accept it, and we need to take advantage of it, and not be the guy that says, "Well, I really liked it this way," when you use the thing and you went across, right, with the with the card and the little swiper that went back and forth. So yes, great times to be in the comic book world, and like I said, it's just we're so slow to catch up to it, but when we do, it's awesome.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned was you said the two most important things. What did you say with?
It's the delivery and the transaction point. How easy is it to check out at that point, right? So if you're at Matt's booth and you're okay, here's my 5 books, and you're logging into that computer, and it's, oh, I just put in my name, oh, my account just popped up, oh, I just hit enter, right? The transaction point is the final point of an actual sale, right? And so when you look at those two parameters, those need to be the most easiest parameters of your sale.
When it comes to that, I think that it's pretty amazing when you're seeing a lot of these things working together. Shopify and eBay, have this thing where they work together. A lot of these apps are working with banks and stuff, I imagine, to get special privileges and stuff. And I see also that a lot of these big apps and places are branching out or pivoting, so to say, right? You see the third-party apps now showing up, live selling, which has become such a big part of things. The technology and how to payment, the technology and how to process, all kinds of stuff. And we're talking about all that, but Matt, CGC kind of went backwards, not necessarily backwards, but they said, you know what? We're going to go put out a print book on CGC's grading at New York Comic Con last year. And that was received very well at the time. How has it been? It's almost been a year, I think now, maybe a little less.
October will be a year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since you guys put out that monster CGC grading book, how has the response been over the time now?
Good. The world didn't blow up. That's a good thing. There was a little part of me that was wondering, it's like, what bomb am I setting off? No, there was always that fear of putting all that information out there, because you never know, but no, I mean, it was fine. In fact, I had to say that the response has been more of a steady, it wasn't like this big boom out the gate thing. It was kind of like, just copies have been steadily selling. And, getting feedback along the way. So I realize now, looking back, that I think it was kind of like such a big thing to digest, that, it's something that takes time to kind of like seep into the, to the consciousness. So, where it goes, I don't know. What people will do with it and what it means in 5 years from now, I have no idea. But, of course, my dealer friends were all like, gave them a copy, as the advertiser would. And they're like, oh, this is great. It's going right on the shelf. They're never going to crack it up. They think they know everything,
Yeah.
But no, it's good. Go ahead.
You've got so many new collectors since the pandemic, I think, that these type of things are very important to explain to these collectors. And that book is just invaluable, in my opinion, especially when you have things where grading a comic, you have pressers now, you have the people collecting high grade books and back issues, and collecting has changed in comics in the last 10 years in a big way. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that I always talk about is I remember, 20, 15 years ago, it was sacrilegious to own a second or third print. It was first print or die. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And in the collecting world recently, there was this big change that, second and third prints are more rare. So we want them more. It's weird how that happens. And, CGC has been a big part of the collecting world. And we've seen back issue sales just be such a big deal. When it comes to how collectors have changed, what is some of the biggest things that you guys have seen?
Well, I'll tell you a thought, what you were saying earlier along the grading guidelines. Yeah, it has changed. And CGC's partly, I guess you could say, to blame for it, because we're doing all the grading now. And so all the collectors today are not learning how to grade. And obviously grading has become a more critical factor because it's a driving force of valuation. Evaluation is a critical factor. So, so you go back to the beginning and you're like, well, they need something that, they don't have. That before, that you had to kind of work your way up and learn, and you had the opportunity to learn because everything was raw and you could go to shows, and you were forced to buy things and learn how to grade, learn how to spot restoration, learn how to value your books in that way. And so, now it's not, there's still the opportunity to do that. And people do that, obviously people that are versed in that are the ones that are submitting the books to CGC. They're part of that ongoing process of moving, the existing books into certified holders. And so, that'll continue on for years. So you have those people, but there's always new people coming in that want to get their books certified for themselves, or maybe they want to start dealing or whatever it is, buying, selling, signature series. And so there's so many facets to it. And so that was really the main purpose of the book, was to give a clarity and transparency to at least the fundamentals. And so, it's not a book that's going to have 50 pictures of a 4.0 and 50 pictures of a 4.5, because I feel like you can get that online all day long. Go to Heritage, and 50 pictures are not going to really show you what a 4.5 is, because there's thousands of kinds of 4.5s, and so, it just gives a foundation for people to at least understand our structure and our standards and our parameters and, all the things that kind of define what we do, and then piecing it together and teaching somebody to how to take all those pieces and put them together and move forward and start that learning curve and try and get them, lifted up, a little bit faster, when they get in there. So, that's my hope for the long term. But, that's definitely a big change over the past 10 or 20 years.
Yeah. What do you think, Clutch?
I mean, honestly, I have absolutely no idea how to grade a book raw. I look at it, unless it's a 9.8 that comes right from a box. Like my eyeballs are like, is this, feathering, chipping, whatever. Like I couldn't look at a vintage book and really be able to kind of like discern what it is, at being a guy who mostly collects modern and variants and the like. So being able to have a resource like that is immensely helpful. And honestly, like I look at stuff like just any sort of knowledge base that you could put, and if you could put it in my hands, like I'm going to look at it. And I think last year at CGC, you guys did the like the grader, like a grader training session where people can come out and like do
the academy.
The academy. You could do a crash course. Like I wasn't able to go because I think it was really close to San Diego Comic-Con time, but I really was like, I would have loved to have gone and did that course.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Should have got you in. We should. I didn't realize. Yeah, I didn't realize. Yeah, that they took in all these people, and it was mostly like it kind of turned into a lottery because we had like 800 people apply, and we only brought in 100. And so it was like this. They went through this vetting system. So yeah, it was really cool. It'd have been cool if you were there because it's. I mean, again, it's like we kind of like scratched the surface. I feel like you can't. You spend a day or two talking about it, or. Yeah, I don't know. It's like the hard thing with the moderns that you face, I know especially is, it's a different animal every, so often where, you've got all the different publishers with the different, printing techniques that keep changing over time, especially in today's world. And so, Shawn's over there constantly dealing with, these, got to create grading curves for certain books because they come with the ink is flecked off or it's got, wavy covers or, some weird thing because the print quality is, a little lower, on that go around. So, modern's a moving target. That's a very challenging one. And so it's really tough to to kind of see, 9, 9, and 10 especially, but even 9, 8s, it's a tough call sometimes. So
we've been seeing a rash of people that have been getting more of these high grade 9, 9, and 10s throughout the past couple of years because of the printing process has changed in comics in such a crazy way, right? We've got these foil covers, metal covers, where or the size or how books are put together, it just makes it so they come out in much better quality. They aren't taking as many damage in between the process, and they get to you. People are better about caring for books. What do you think has been the biggest change in those high grades, though, Matt? Is it because of the printing process, or do you think it's because people care more about grades?
I think it's the printing process specifically to the book. Some books are just printed better than others, and they're going to get more 9, 9s and 10s, or sometimes none. Maybe it's only 9, 8. So I think it's really, but I mean, some publishers are definitely higher quality, and some struggle a little bit more. So I shouldn't name names, but I say like Image is very nice. Those are very good books, So, but yeah, so it really just depends. Like I said, it's a new challenge, waiting around, every month there's something that's potentially coming on the pike that's going to be a problem. So, but then there's some books, we give, they're just beautiful. They're printed really, really, but like, you say like some of the heavier stock covers, tend to get those grades more often just because they hold up. But, I think people, the time from, you were mentioning people taking care of them. I mean, the gap from printing to grading is just shrunk more and more and more to where it's like literally coming right in the door. I mean, it may it could shrink even more than that at some point. So it's the days of storage and waiting and chances of things happening are getting smaller and smaller with the new books, at least. Obviously the older stuff, it's too late for that. They're 10, 20 years behind us, but
Right.
yeah, but the brand new books for sure come right in.
Well, you at least for Matt and Jesse, you guys grew up in comic book shops. You've gathered this how to grade a book over a lifetime of being around comics in a comic shop, which is super important because a lot of people I know that are collectors, they don't know how to grade books. I don't know how to grade a book very well. I think it's something over a lifetime.
Sure, and keep in mind, most collectors started off as numerical collectors, 1 through 10, right? That was the goal of comic books, complete a collection. Then all of a sudden we started getting signatures, right? Oh, let's get some signatures on some books. And then all of a sudden we had mini series come out. I remember Wolverine #1 coming out, and I'm holding it to the crowd, and I'm like, who wants Wolverine #1? Well, what's a mini series? I'm like, I don't know. I'm 12 years old, right? But it's 4 issues, right? Then we got into LTDs, limited editions, and limited numbers. And, of course, Chaos Comics comes out and, 10,000 of this, Red Velvet, and all this stuff. And so grading comes out, right? And all some people are grading. And I'm sitting there saying, dude, just put that on your Britannica encyclopedias, right? Just put that underneath your book, your comic, under those books for 10 weeks and that's how you grade a book, right? That's how you make a good looking book. And so I think what's happened is you're either born into grading, into the comic book world, where anybody that's collected over the last at least 10 years, that's part of your growth in the comic book world is grading books, how to go to the rack, look at the spines first, look at the staples and all that. Where you have a generation where we didn't do that, right? We just read books and we got books and that was it. You looked at a cover and you said, yeah, exactly. You looked at a cover and said, oh, Beast is fighting Magneto. Okay, I gotta have that book. So what happens is you've evolved with a group of collectors, me and Matt, who said, okay, well, we'll evolve with this. And then you had collectors who know no different. If I told someone in 1982, oh, no, we didn't have CGC, they would go nutty. Well, why did you collect comics back then? Right? Because they're so used to that. when you're looking at the quality of paper that is used, it's no longer, hey, Dynamite's just then do a whole bunch of covers and half of them are then come in and half of them are then be spine ticks. Okay, fine, we accept that. That's not acceptable anymore for a publisher. So it's heavy stock, pay that extra money because they know people are now grading their books. And that's a big difference in how comics has evolutionized how comic book collectors collect now. And so I think it's very interesting.
On that point, Jesse, and this is for everybody, do you think that that isn't until recently where the comic book industry has really keyed in on the collector more than the reader? I mean, has that happened recently, or because I feel like forever it was just about comic book consumers were readers, right? And then probably within the last 20, 30 years, it became more that people are collecting than reading. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think, well, you know, I mean, we had the crash in the 90s, the investor bubble. That was probably the culmination of what started in the 70s. And then it was like it went back to the roots. And then all of a sudden, you had this, you know, explosion of creativity that bled to the 2000s, where you had all these amazing series that were coming out that were branching out from just the superhero stuff. And so, which, you know, dovetails into Hollywood. And so now today, yeah, the landscape's completely changed, but you do have, you know, it's concerning, you know, I mean, you don't want that, you know, back in my head, I'm thinking the 90s the whole time right now. I'm like, let's hope that we're not going to see that again, because there are facets of it coming back, you know, the variants and all that, but they're doing it differently. They're smarter about it today. It's more controlled and things are more controlled. I think CGC is part of that too. So you know, hopefully it's not, but I do think readership is still very, you know, very much so there. I mean, obviously the number of readers today, I mean, the number of copies printed is pretty low. I mean, right there, guys, the print runs these days are still like, what, 10,000, 20,000, 30, right, 50 for your big titles. I mean, it's like a shadow of what it was, even especially the 90s. But, you know, so I mean, those are getting, you know, how many of those are read? But then there's also like the when they, you know, they what's it called, the graphic novels and all when they come out. So, you know, I think they're being read in some form or fashion. Are people reading what they're buying off the rack, so to speak, you know, at the stores, or, you know, the new comics? I don't know if they're physically reading those as much, but it's in some form or fashion. I think they're certainly reading it, because, you know, this stuff is you know, the character, you know, I mean, they're making the Miles Morales, Spider-Man and stuff like that. I mean, it's like they're making movies out of this stuff. So, you know, it's reaching an audience, certainly. So, but yeah, it's, you know, it's a fear that that the speculation end of it is going to get at, you know, is going to, we're going to have a repeat.
Yeah, there's a bubble. Yeah. Right. There's just, everybody thinks about that 90s thing, which is very, very important to kind of talk about. Clutch, as you know, you spent a long time with the publisher working on the publishing side. Does the publisher think about that? Like on a level, what level does the publisher think about the collector and the reader?
It's a great question. I think we would always think about the reader first, right? And it's always, you know, you have a cover A, right? And so you know that's going to be the book that sells, and that's hopefully the book that people are pulling off the shelf to read. Your covers B, C, D, E, and down the line, those are the ones like, hey, like this is going to be a cool extra cover for someone. They're probably not going to read that cover, but they're going to read the first one and hopefully buy a second one as like, that's the one, you know, you buy one to read, you buy one to bag. And that's, you know, that's how we kind of treat it. And the book, you know, book trade is really where I think you see a lot more readers, and people are going. So there are people who are trade waiters, like they'll buy variants and hold those, but then they'll read the whole series once it comes out in a trade paperback form or whatever collected edition they can get.
Yeah, that's it. I was calling it graphic novel. Well, hey, trade paperback. Yes. Yeah.
That works.
There you go.
They both work.
Yeah.
I think honestly, like Jesse probably would have like the most like on hand, like, you know, information. It's like he's, you know, seeing people every Wednesday who are picking up their books and they're getting, you know, what they're pulling off the shelf. Like, what do you got?
Right, exactly. And I think this is a more of a cultural, traditional coaching thing, where if someone comes in your store and they say, hey, you have a Secret Wars 8, and you go, oh yeah, I got one for, XYZ, and they buy it, but you don't say, hey, did you actually want to read that series? Did you actually want 1 through 7 and 9 through 12 to actually know what you just bought, other than just Black Costume, Secret Wars number 8? And we always seem to forget about that. I always tell people, when Blackest Night came out, I immediately called Diamond and I said, I need 1,000 copies of Tales of the Green Lantern Corps. And they didn't know why I needed that. And I said, well, because that's where Blackest Night started. Green Lantern, the Green Team fights Necron, and they beat him themselves. And people need to know that. We need to teach people about our culture and our tradition. I think it's very important. So I think where we fail is we just sell people what they want and not educate them on what they should actually get, so that what they're reading actually makes sense. And so I think that's where we have this big job to coach people and give them that opportunity to actually buy one more book that might help them learn what they're actually reading.
One of the greatest things about going to a comic book store when I was younger, I remember just going up there to hang out and talk to people, like, people giving, hey, have you read this? Oh yeah, I love that. No, I haven't read that. I'd love to see it. Oh, and they walk you over to, hey, check this out. Da, da, da. And I feel like I don't see that as much as I used to. Granted, I'm not in a comic book store as much, but does that happen as much as it today, Jesse, in comic book stores, or at least in your comic book store, than it did in the past?
I think it does, but you got to keep in mind, we went from 12 to 18-year-olds as being our prime buyers to now our prime buyers are 35 to 60. So they're getting off work. They're coming in for some good comic book therapy. And so they're coming in by themselves. They bring their kids in on the weekend. The kids don't get off the phone. So it's very tough to get that younger generation to actually partake in the event of buying a book, right? Event is buying a book is cool and it's fun and it's a timestamp, right? Most people, when you ask them about a book, especially their first book they ever bought, they never tell you about the story in the book. They tell you everything else on how they bought that book. And so I think we are in a world now that traditional buying is different, right? A good portion of my customers buy live streaming, right? And so I'll never meet them in my life or never be able to shake their hands, but they've bought thousands of books from me. And so I think culturally, it's okay that that's that way. I think if you can leverage both ways at your store, where you're live streaming and you're doing eBay and then you're also selling in your store, I think that's a good thing. So I wouldn't say it's a bad thing that that doesn't happen anymore. I just think you need to use all your platforms to stay in touch with your customer base and listen to their needs, their wants. And you'll find that most customers, they're just there to get their books and they want to get home. They've had a long day at work and they just want some good comic book therapy and read a comic book.
Yeah. I also think that where that kind of is happening a lot now is in platforms like this, right? Where people can get with friends and talk about comics, and whether you're broadcasting it or not, the pandemic kind of changed things and how we socialize. Social media over the years has changed things, how we socialize. There's just such a big change in our lives in the last 10 years, especially the last 3 years, that this has become the place where a lot of people will talk about, oh, I love this story. Do you remember this? Or check this out. Like kind of like that at LCS.
Yeah, it's like being at a comic show. I mean, at a comic store. That's the way it was in the 90s. Yeah, that was the place to hang out and chit chat, and you got to know all these people that became your customers and you friends, and yeah, you had that shared passion of comics, and inside a comic store surrounded by comics, with new comics coming every week. I mean, it was like a dream, and yeah, it was that yeah, like you said, that seems to have kind of moved in a large part online, where you have obviously a lot more people reaching or finding each other and doing the same thing.
Yeah. What was the distribution? I want to talk about how distribution for comics was, let's say in the 80s and early 90s. What was the distribution landscape like in that time, Jesse or Matt, if you don't mind answering that?
Well, at that time, we were getting our books on Friday. So a little bit different timing on getting your books. Your customer, we didn't know what was coming out. We literally didn't know what was in the boxes. You got to keep in mind, our eBay store was the rack at 7-Eleven. That was your eBay store. Your comic book store doesn't have it. You got to go to 7-Eleven. That was our eBay store. And so, and that's the world we grew up on. You actually had to call stores to see if they had a book. You didn't go on their webpage. You didn't go on eBay. You would actually call and said, "Hey, do you have this book?" Right? And so I think it was this great time because people would come in the store, technically the box holders, and we would open up a box and say, "Who wants Wolverine #1?" And 5 people would raise their hand. I'm like, "You guys are crazy. I'm going to buy 10 of these," right? And trying to sell one more book. And I think as we started to get more technology, as far as all of a sudden Diamond was in the mix, right? And Diamond was buying out publisher after publisher after publisher, and you're trying to revamp, okay, who am I actually buying these books from? And so I think distribution was very challenging back then because everything's turn rates, right? It doesn't matter if you made 100,000 books or 30,000 books. What was your turn rates? If you made 30,000 books and you sold 25,000, that's a awesome turn rate. If you made 100,000 and only sold 40,000, what the hell are you doing? And so as we started to get out of the 90s and not doing that anymore, I think distribution had changed. But in the 80s, it was really had no idea what was going on. Thor 337, I think, was one of the first books to ever hit national attention. First beta ray, I remember watching it on TV and buying 20 copies of it as a kid. And but you didn't know what was hot. Right, you got to keep in mind, in 1982, an AF-15 was only $1,000 book. So,
and stayed that way until 1988.
Yeah, exactly, till that time, because people didn't know what it was selling for. So I think distribution has grown with a great pattern. Keep in mind, there's no fewer stores in history of the comic book industry. Well, I'm sure you could go back to the 40s and 50s than there is now, right? 3,000 store owners across the nation. Back then, 90s, Matt, what, 12,000, 15,000 store owners?
It was so many. They were everywhere. Every smallest town had 2 or 3.
So it becomes supply and demand. And so I think distribution back in my day, and keep in mind, 12 years old, you don't know too much about margins, turn rates, sell-throughs, and bottom lines. You just sold comics. I think
the people back then weren't, they weren't as business savvy as, especially today.
No.
There was a bunch of geeks that, are ordering books every month, hoping to get it right.
Sure. I remember running the Jack Kirby line in 1983, and a guy walked up to the wall, and I forgot what it was, Journey into Mystery, whatever it was. And I know Thor was on the cover, so we'll just say Thor. And when we said it was $5, this guy went ballistic on us. And I remember saying to the guy, "But Jack Kirby's going to sign this for you." And he's like, "Well, will you take $2? And so when you deal with this inflation of value, the value was really back then, do I need that comic for my collection to complete it? So I think back to the question of publishing, when you deal in a world where you see this big person who's just evolving in the diamond machine back in the day. I actually started the same month Diamond became a company. That's how long I've been doing this. And you see this evolution and you see this way to distribute. And you realize that it was actually easier back in the 80s than it will ever be today. Back then, you would have had Capital, Tri-City, Yeah, there was tons of people. There's probably 25 distributors at the time.
Yeah,
Um,
Capital was the second. Like them and Diamond were, because we
Yeah.
were from both of them. I remember, and then
Yeah.
close to the mid '90s, Diamond gobbled everything up, and it was all Diamond after that. So
Capital's last publisher, they would come to us trying to sell us kitchen sink stuff. And I'd say, okay, well, what else do you got? At that time, it was like 18. Well, what else you got? Oh, that's all we got. And I'm like, I think I'm going to call my Diamond guy. Right? Yeah.
and and it's like it's happening. We're seeing the splintering now. It's going back to what it was to some degree. Now you got like multiple catalogs and stuff. So it's interesting. Yeah, very interesting time. That you saw the beginning and the end of that. That period of time where it was all under one roof. So it's I don't order new books anymore, but we used to have fun because it's like, yeah, like you said, it was like I think it was 3 months advance. You get the previews and what was the Capital one called? I forgot the catalog. So this big fat catalog, and you get in the mail, and we would just like close the shop, go over to somebody's house that night, start partying and just start ordering books. And you fill your folders, whoever's ordering whatever, you calculate that probably on paper. We didn't have a computer back then. This is mid '90s. It was so off the cuff. And then you'd be like, what do you want to order? Like another extra 10, 20. Oh, this looks cool. Let's order 30, And then, inevitably 3 months later, you get your shipments in, and sometimes you pull it out and you're like, oh God, what did I do?
Right.
Blew like $400 on this, and that's the way it was, into the box they went, and so it was definitely the Wild West to some degree.
I remember walking into Jesse's store in the early 2000s, mid aughts, 2009, 2008, so 2010, and seeing 30 stacks of Walking Dead. How many Walking Dead books would you order back then, Jesse?
We were doing 2,500, and it was anywhere from 15 to 2,500 copies. And I think one of the things was because I had such a great relationship with Shawn that we wanted to be part of the publisher, and we felt the more books we bought would help them. And so it really became this, who do we want to help? Who are our best allies? So it was Shawn and it was Ross. Those were our allies. And we felt that in any dark days that came, we wanted to support those that we might need their help in the future. And so it was, I think there is one issue that I still have 4,000 copies of because Shawn gave me this great call. And we had bought 5,000 copies just because Shawn had suggested it, right? And I joke around, we don't have 4,000 copies left, but I think what happens is, as a business person in the comic book world, you can't look at every sale as a measurement as success. You have to look at every purchase with your publisher as a partnership for life. And even when we left, being one of the first stores in, I know, this century to leave Diamond, not close, and say, listen, we're just not going to spend $15,000 a week every week. We're just not to make $2,000 a week. It was Shawn and it was Ross who were the first people to call me and say, how can we help you now that you're not with Diamond at the time? I remember walking up to Shawn at San Diego, and Shawn just looked at me. He's like, you're going to put me on the spot, aren't you? Because I had just left Diamond, and Diamond had really put it out there, do not sell to Jesse, because he's not closing his store. He's going the opposite. He's going to do better business. I closed my store with 550 box holders.
I know.
Yeah, not in the negative, not owing money or anything like that. I just woke up one day and said, how can I spend $1,000 to make $3,000, not spend $1,000 in back or new issues to make $200? and it just made sense with me. But our relationship throughout the time has been amazing. So when it came to Walking Dead and the pictures that we would post, and Shawn invited me to my first dinner ever with Kirkman, and sitting across from him, and all my buddies sitting to the far right, Dre and Tori, and how did you get to sit in front of him? And all that comes into play when you're buying books, right? So you're about that. You are the turn rate, the sell through guy, but you're also understanding branding is just as important, and you're partnering up with a publisher. And you have to make that make sense to your customer base. Midnight releases, right? Why would a customer get up at midnight to buy Walking Dead 100? Well, first of all, we have 100 copies of each cover on the tables for you. And so I think it's relation building, and Walking Dead was one of those books. And I don't know if Shawn knows this, but what I really made my name in the business was there was 1,500 copies of the Walking Dead script book in Diamond, and I was buying like 30 at a time, and on eBay selling them for $20. And then I'd buy 30 and sell them for $30. And then I'd buy 30 and I'd sell them for $40. And then I just said to Diamond, how many do you got left? 1,200. I'll take them all. Right. And all of a sudden I was selling them for $60, $70 each. And everybody's like, I want some. And they'd say, oh, I sold it to this guy in Glendale, Arizona, and he bought them all. Right. And you just, when there's so many books out, you have to choose what's going to take you to the dance. And if there's 120 books that come out to a week, I have to look at Walking Dead, I have to look at Power Rangers, and I have to say those are that's the product that's going to take me to the promised land every single month. I don't have to guess. So I can buy as much as I want without having too much on the shelf. And so that's how you do that process. But Walking Dead, I will tell you, every month would pay my bills. That's how much we would buy.
Yeah. And it feels like that has really changed, especially, again, that's the big part about this show. This first show is to talk about kind of the state of the industry right now. And there's been this big change, at least in coming from a collector's perspective, which that's what I am. I'm coming from the collectors, in that new books aren't on the forefront anymore. When I would walk into a comic book store, I would go straight for the first book that I want to read that day. You know what I mean? Make sure I procure that copy. And then I'm looking at all the new books first, and then I might go look at the back issues, right? Back issues have taken the forefront, I think, now over that in that thought process, if that makes sense. Is that a problem for publishers, Shawn?
That's another good question. Bryan, you're killing it tonight, dude. I think it's hard to find something that resonates with new buyers, right? Because that new buyer pool is shrinking as everyone gets older. And Jesse mentioned earlier, like the average age of a comic buyer who's buying a new book is creeping up as we're all creeping up. So you got to find something that hits, and they all don't hit. And that people are going to go in there and they're going to find those, they want to look for back issue stuff that they missed, or other cool variants that a shop owner got, maybe a 1 in 15 that no one knew about, or some special stuff. But they're always going to try to find that thing, right? Because every I'm not going to say any names of books that have like kind of failed, but then you'll get something that's killing the children, right? And that you get a hit book, and then that thing takes off, right? And you're really lucky. But sometimes you're going to take a bet on a creator and they're going to put out 3 or 4 or 5 not good titles, and then at some point they put out enough books and someone catches on. They're like, oh, I've heard that guy before. I'm going to give him a shot this time. I know I've heard him, he did this series and that series, but I'm going to give this one a shot. And you hope that that's the one that, people really kind of stick with.
Yeah. On top of what Shawn's saying, it's like the people want to, it's almost like the series has to prove itself first. And you have, readers have become the speculators, because, the regular readers, the traditional ones, because they're the ones that are willing to take a shot each week on stuff. And, whether it hits or not, because Shawn's exactly right. It's like, oftentimes it doesn't. But if it does, the stuff that they bought, oftentimes now everybody's going back to find those issues, or they're holding on to them, so they've got, so it is a bit of a speculative, like an investment thing almost, but from a readership standpoint. So, I do think, but I think, ultimately I think, in the back of a lot of these creators' heads is, are they going to, are they creating a franchise? Are they creating something, and I think ultimately that's what's going to, keep this thing going, like it's always, it has been for the past several years, is that, people are, the readers come in, they're just coming in a different direction. They're coming in through, television and movies and all that stuff into the comic shops saying, I want this, I want that. This is proven, I read this, I saw this, whatever. And, I want this now. And so I think, it's like the comic shop's like a breeding ground for ideas, and it's just a cauldron of ideas, and you're able to go there and just kind of tap into the fountain if you want. And then ultimately it just comes showering down from the top from all these other people from all these other places going, oh my God, I gotta get this. It's like the latest, the latest and greatest. So, it's definitely the dynamic has completely changed, but, I certainly don't think, thank God, I don't think it's going to die just because of this dynamic. It's keeping it alive, but in a different fashion, it seems.
Yeah, it's really amazing to see how much entertainment pushes the comics industry right nowadays. If the IPs, owning that IP is so important, because now you can movies, TV, video games, toys, and movies and TV have pushed comics in such a major way over the last 10 years. It's unbelievable. We always say, I can't believe that we ever got an Avengers movie, yet alone 3 of them, and now every movie feels like a superhero genre movie, or taking from a comic book series more than it used to be a novel, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. And you think that would really help push the new stuff coming back or coming out, where people would be like, okay, I knew this was a comic before. Now I'm going to go start reading the stuff they're putting out from that comic. But it doesn't feel like that's happening, at least from my end. Do you guys think that has been a big change also?
My job is to sell comics, and my job is to take advantage of anything out there that helps me promote to sell a comic book, whether it be a TV show, a movie show, or a movie, action figures, a great thing from the 80s or the 70s. And if you go back and you say, well, how come Hulk comics didn't sell in the 70s with the Hulk banner and all that stuff, and why didn't G.I. Joe comics sell and Transformers sell in the 80s as much, right? Well, you could say Transformers, the mid-series 1 through 4, become 75 because of popularity and all that. But I think what happens is, when it gets to this stuff, the job of a comic book store owner is to look at his new issue wall of 120 issues and say, how do I sell this stuff that wasn't a movie, wasn't on a TV show, and has zero promotion? Those are the books that we have the challenges of selling. So now it becomes, do I like that publisher? Do I like the artist? Do I like the creator? Is it polybagged, so I have this special thing I can sell to someone? So I think the notion of whatever you want to call it, bells and whistles, gimmicks, whatever it is, a store owner's job is to take advantage of that and push out as many books as they can so they can afford their books the following week. But I think it's also a thing of listening to your customers. The best question at the counter is, what else are you reading, right? And most people will tell you, I just saw the Avengers movie. Okay, well, I gotta walk them over to the Avengers section before I go. Hey, did you read Korvac Saga? One of the greatest Avengers stories of all time, that type of thing. So I think when you look at today's social media outreach, It's kind of like that. What's the rule? There's no such thing as a leak. It's done by the company itself to say, hey, leak this out so we get more promos. And I think that's the store owner's job too, is to kind of give that customer a little bit more information that will entice them to try out that book. Do you need to sell a Walking Dead book back in the day? Well, probably not, but you should not ignore the fact that someone might not know what Walking Dead is. So I think it really becomes that experience of listening to the customer, finding their likes, giving them some options. And then on the other end, I guess the best thing I can tell you is you have to create enough knowledge for yourself. I would say if this was conversation was 7 years ago, you could read Bleeding Cool, right? But now you have IO9 and Comic Vine, Newsarama, yeah, comicbookmovie.com, and you can really educate yourself. The benefit I have is my store is sponsored by Paramount Pictures Plus and Legendary and Lionsgate and Nickelodeon and WWE. I have all these sponsors that are just flooding me with information. And so I think what you want to do is you want to make yourself part of that brand, whatever brand that is, so that when the customer is talking to you, they feel like you're representing that. And that's how you sell the books based on that movie or that TV show.
Yeah. I think that the collector aspect is such a big part of it to me, and so is nostalgia and remembering of what when it was, how good it was when it was good, and us sitting around here and talking about the good old the good old days that people could say back in the 80s, the 90s, or the 70s, or the 60s, whatever it is, when they loved comics just in such a way that it makes them feel good talking about it. Nostalgia moves the collectibles industry in a big way because as people get older, the generations change. Look how important Pokemon is and stuff like that to the generation young under me, and I don't care about big GI Joes. I care about the 3 3/4 GI Joes, that type of stuff. What do you guys think, coming from the aspects where you guys come from, is something that needs to be hit, to continue the collecting aspect? Like, is there things that we should be doing in the comic book industry, to go after maybe manga collectors, because that's becoming the new thing, that type of aspect?
Well, you bring up manga or manga. I don't know which one is which. Is it which one is it? Either.
Yeah.
Whatever the customer says, that's what it is.
Yeah. So we're actually exploring grading manga or manga at some point. Yeah. So, but I mean, but to a bigger point, obviously the readership is huge, much larger than it is here, and they're probably more traditional, the way that we used to be, where they're buying them to read them and discard them. I obviously space is an issue in Japan, which is a factor in collecting. But I think generally speaking, they really haven't yet, as of yet, put a huge emphasis on saving them, collecting them, or rather being grade conscious or value conscious. But so much great stuff has come out of manga over the past several decades that has bled over into all these other cultures that it's so ever present that at this stage the American this side of collecting and all publishing and all that can't you can't ignore that. But yeah, as far as like getting expanding, I don't know, it's tough. I mean, the uphill battle is that, like you said earlier, the kids are on their phones, or Jesse said that, the kid, and to tear them away from that and to get them to reading something, especially on paper, is an uphill battle that I don't know if we'll ever go back to it. So, I think the key is to get the story, you still have the story, the creators are still putting out material, the artists, writers, everybody, that's putting out great stuff. So it's a matter of getting it into people's hands digitally or whatever, which I know that's been, going on for a long time now, but just getting it in their hands somehow, and keeping the young people engaged with all the great stuff that's coming out of comic books, because the creativity again is still on an unprecedented scale. So, whether it finds its, way through, to the young kids or to the movies, to them, whatever it is, I think that's key.
Marvel is really recently they introduced 2 new characters that have actually kind of taken off in a good way, in my opinion. They've been really well received. They're very manga influenced or anime influenced, right? That the Venom Boy character, and I think I forget the other character's name. She's Sailor Moon inspired. Great design on the characters. It's been very well received in the short period of time it's been out, and I think that's an important thing as well to kind of change where what the readership likes and stuff like that. So we'll see if that's the case. But at the same time, it's very interesting to see that how many young people don't read comics.
A lot.
That's a big deal, right?
Right. But the one thing I want to say is you have to be that good grandpa, basically. You have to be the Pawn Star dude, right? You got to be the American Pickers dude. You got to be the Key Collectors dude. You got to be the Price Guide dude. You have to be the person that when people come to you, you can talk to them in a way that inspires them to want to invest in a comic book or a toy. And so, knowing what's going on socially in your environment is very, very important. And you need to know these venues without having any, they really don't know what they're doing. Yeah, but they have 100,000 people that follow them, so they're doing something right. So I think you really got to get out there and you got to learn what is being talked about. Listen, it doesn't happen all the time, but people walk up to me and they're with a new issue and say, "Hey, should I send this in for grading?" And I'm like, "Well, are you gonna read it?" "Oh no." "Well, then," and then you start that conversation from there, right? Okay, this guy's just a key collector, right? "Well, why are you sending this for grading?" "Well, this is the first XYZ." "Okay, well, let me show you some other books you should send in for grading," right? "Oh, by the way, did you need to get those pressed?" And so now you go into your pressing and your cleaning stuff. "Did you want us to do that, or do you want CGC to do that?" And so your evolution of being a salesperson on the floor is how you keep people to be collectors, right? The proudest thing I have accomplished in the comic book world is having probably the most women collectors in the nation. I think we're something like 62% of our collectors are women. Right. And what that's done is it tells us we've opened up the venue to the store that anybody can collect, and they're not going to feel odd or out of place.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's very, very important to really open up your doors so that when someone comes in, because listen, if someone comes in and they're asking for anime or manga, a lot of them feel out of place when they walk into a comic book store because they're like, I don't see any of this stuff. So I guess I could ask, but then kind of feel stupid. And so you have to open up that door and be the guy that your team needs to be the team that knows a little bit about everything. And I guess my last point is, even me, I'll say, "Hey, don't give me a second." I run over to my computer and say, "I don't know that answer. Let me find it out for you." Right. So don't be afraid to be the guy that says, I really don't know what you're talking about. Be the guy that says, let's both learn together. Yep. And then that's how you get people to stay into that comic book collecting or that toy collecting world.
Yeah. Amen. The one thing that we're also seeing a big change in is, these new third-party apps, whether it's Whatnot, eBay Live, TikTok Shop. There's all these new ways to sell comic books, and it's amazing the change in the market that is causing, right? And I know I have 2 people here right now. Jesse, that is one of the first people that I knew of that was, doing the the Facebook Live sales and stuff like that. And Clutch, now you've kind of jumped in that arena a little bit also, which is very interesting. You know, to see you jump from like the publishing side to, you know, the retailer side. What's that been like, jumping into these new live selling arenas?
It's been interesting. I mean, we really, I mean, honestly, like Jesse is the godfather of this with the comic book shop network on Facebook and doing that stuff. And I learned a lot by watching his shows and him and Jen. And then when Skybound started to do Comics Fall Live, and that led into the pandemic, which really, like, that was the catalyst for, I think, a lot of these apps and this type of sales to take off, because people weren't, you couldn't go into the shops for a longest time. You didn't go out much. And then, if I'm able to pop up on my screen and I can say, hey, I got this book here and I got this, this rare book, or it's graded, and, I'll sell it to you right now and I'll ship it to you tomorrow and you'll get it by the end of the week. Like, that was a really big, tool to be able to have, and it's stuck, which is interesting. So, Whatnot was, the Facebook Live, the Instagram sales, then Whatnot, and now eBay trying to get it with eBay Live. It's a really, like, the space is ever evolving, and it's really interesting to see how it's gonna kind of continue to go.
Yeah, it's game changing, man. Absolutely game changing.
Yeah, I think when I started doing this 8 years ago, one of the reasons why I left Diamond was you could not technically live stream and sell new issues. So you're then impede me from selling new issues live to orphan customers around the nation. And my notion was, when I first started doing live stream again 8 years ago, I wasn't doing anything new, right? QVC had already been doing live streaming for freaking 25 years. We didn't invent anything. We're just doing it in comic books. But the notion was, at the time, I was thinking there's 4,000 stores across the nation, and there's almost 17,500 cities across the nation. So that means there's 14,000 cities that don't have comic book stores. I want to sell to those folks. I can sell to the Glendale and Arizona folks all day. How do I sell to the guy in Iowa? And so when we first did it, being one of the first two to do it in the comic book industry, obviously people were selling comics before me live, but first two people in the comic book industry, you learn that selling comics is more of a personality thing. They're looking at you on the screen and saying, do I really want to open up my wallet for that person? I don't know if I'm getting my stuff. This isn't eBay. I have no guarantees. This is Facebook Live. So this guy's going to charge my card, and I hope that I get it. And so you start to learn that it was so new. We used to go to 3 a.m., 4 a.m., sell 4,000 or 5,000 books in 4 or 5 hours, because we're the only people doing it, right? And so what happens is it evolves. We create Comic Book Shopping Network, and then everybody else starts coming in. And we created Comic Book Shopping Network, me and Jen King, just so that other stores across the nation could pay their power bills. And we, to this day, we haven't charged one person for it. And now you have the Whatnots of the world, the EBLs, eBay Live, and networks, and Drips, and Pop Live, and all this stuff. And the only thing it's done is allow more people to collect comics. It allows more people to be part of a community of people that love comics. The greatest satisfaction is when you see someone, last night, a guy bought $1,000 book. And for 30 people to say, congratulations, oh my God. I mean, that's just a great way to buy. That's kind of why they do mail calls, right? Because the person's by themselves and they're like, I need to celebrate with someone. Let me get some people to watch, right? I think CGC is a great example of saying, hey, I got this, and look at the grade I got it in, right? And you're technically showing it off, but you're with a like-minded audience. And I think that's what social networking and live streaming has brought. They created the third market. outside of the big box stores and your comic book stores, and it allows people to be part of everything, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what your income is, whether you live in a house or a cardboard box. You get to be part of the comic book community. We've been a close-knit community for a long, long time. And for us to be able to get out there, create personalities, I'm getting ready to do my 1500 live show just on my own personal show. And I look at all those people that bought books from me or watched the show. And I just say, man, these are people that walked up to me at San Diego Con and gave me hugs and took pictures of, and I'm like, please tell me your name, because you don't see anybody, right? And you're like, please, how do I get their name without saying, what's your name? And so I think this new world has allowed us to sell more books. I think it engages people, whether it is in the key collector world. I think it's brought together people that graded comics for a long time was 1% of the business, and then became 2%, and then became 5%. And now it's this high, whatever the numbers are, Matt, now. But it's now because people have this social awareness that it is part of the community, and I can be part of it, and I can show off what I get.
Yeah. Matt, I was asking how do you look at these live selling apps and the new selling spaces and within the CGC atmosphere?
Well, it's it is amazing. I mean, everything Jesse's saying is it's really cool to hear how it blew up and became what it is today. Because I think obviously CGC gets we get advertisement from it, our product gets sold through it, but in a grander scheme of things, it's like when eBay popped up 25 years ago now, and the internet really got going, you cross one bridge in that you gave people access to the books that they didn't have otherwise, or going into their local comic shop was all they had, or if they were lucky, a convention. And so that opened up that venue. But the streaming brought along the other component of it, which is the human aspect of it that you would get being in a comic store, where you're in a virtual store where you have access to like anything you want, but you still have that person there in front of you that's telling you all about it, sharing stories, talking to you as if you were in a comic store. And so I think that was the second component needed that really kind of brought the LCS completely virtually or virtual, to where people had that experience like it was back in the day, or at least somewhere they didn't have access to before. So it's been incredible to watch, especially through the pandemic. Obviously, just accelerated that because everyone's home. I mean, we kind of like kicked it off, and so it's nice to see people buying. All the new collectors are being reached, all the new things are being exposed to. Obviously, the sellers are this is another income stream for them. We obviously get an advertisement out of it. Comics are getting, just spread around even more. So it's another level to just getting comic books out there. And again, another pathway for people to come, into their store, buy new comics, whatever it is, any of these, all these other, these paths that didn't exist before, now here and still forming, that are just bringing people back, into the fold. And doing what we hope they continue to do, which is read comic books.
Hey Matt, I guess my question for you would be: has CGC witnessing during a live streaming event, is that an impact for your brand?
I mean, we have the 6 series is. I think when we put that out there, it's part of the experience that we're creating for the fans to see what we're doing. When we're doing the signings, we've already got the books. The books have been sent in. They've been lined up. They're about to get signed. They're getting signed. We do cool things like sometimes they reach out to random submitters. They'll call them on the phone and be like, hey, I'm signing your book right now. What do you think of that? So. Yeah, little clever things kind of just bring people into the process of it happening. Which again, like all the other things we're talking about, you're getting to see something that you couldn't see before, because now we have access, through all this, and so that experience experience seems to be becoming more and more a thing with people where, it's, yes, they want the product, they want the comic, they want the slab, whatever, but they want that experience with it too, of buying it, of having it signed or whatever the case is. So, it's all becoming one package now.
Yeah, and it's a great lane for creators now too. I mean, to be able to say like, watch Clutch do an eBay live show with some creator, and you guys are talking while that creator is signing, and you're selling certain books. And like you said, you're a fly on the wall in that area. You're seeing the creator draw. You're asking the creator questions. It's become this multimedia thing, that is absolutely amazing to witness.
It's incredible.
And, I'm surprised. I'm very surprised that platforms like YouTube and Amazon, Twitter, like haven't really jumped into that. I imagine they are jumping into it now, but it would. I think.
Twitter just bought us for $3 billion. I didn't tell you guys that. No, I'm just kidding. Wait, Twitter? I mean X. What am I talking about?
Yeah.
X, yeah.
Elon Musk now owns us. So we just sold for $20 billion.
Start complaining to Elon Musk. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's kind of like eBay, right? eBay is in beta, and eBay could be in beta the next 10 years, right? Now they won't be. But when you get companies into this arena who are then say, listen, we're then put not 100 million into this, we're then put whatever XYZ into it. So we're not in this rush to do this. Let Whatnot continue to do what they do and just say over comic book shopping. That's fine, because we're going to learn this step by step. Me and Clutch get to see the back end of it and how hard the back end is just to get on the screen to sell one book. It's enormous for what these teams are doing. So when you look at an Amazon who says, listen, we can't do this unless we come out and we're just punching people in the gut. And so I think Amazon is one of those companies that will be last to the dance, but that part of the dance is going to be crazy because they'll take everything. They want to know what eBay Live is doing, right? Yeah. And you then take the 10 things they do great, the 10 things Whatnot does great, but let us do the 10 things we do great. And now we got 30 great things to do, right? I'll give you a prime example. I could have the same guy bring in a Wolverine #1 CGC 9.8, right? I want XYZ. And the second he brings in a 9.8 customized label, he wants 3 times more, right? And so what happens, we just evolve. Value evolves. The product evolves, the ultimate experience evolves, right? Well, I got this label and this label. Which experience do you want? Well, obviously you want the custom label. You want the other label. And there's no difference. They're both the same grade and they're both same comic. And so I think that's the world that we're in. And I think when you look at these companies on the outreach that are coming into this business, a lot of people in the collectible world, when they look at it, they say, tell me the business, just give me business 101 in the comic book world. I come from corporate Nordstrom. When I came into this world, I'm like, I can't even find business 1, right? It's done. It's battle in the jungles, right? And do whatever you want to do, and no contracts and no sign. Yeah, it's just nonstop. And you're like, and Shawn's like, hey dude, why are you in a suit at the con, right? I'm like, well, I thought we were supposed to be in suits, coming from corporate. And then you realize, no, you just go in a hat and a shirt and a Punisher shirt and whatever. And I think we've evolved into this kind of this business 101 now, and it's taken a lot of us a long time to catch up to it. And I think that's what you're then find in the live streaming world is, how do you make comic books work? A prime example, first thing I asked eBay, because they're like, where you then grade stuff? I'm like, well, if I charge the guy for grading, he's not going to get the grade for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. Are you then ding me for me not getting the thing shipped out to him? Well, yeah, of course, because he hasn't got the item yet. So you want me to do 100 grades, but you're then ding me 100 times for not getting the comic back to the person in a day when it's going to CGC.
Yeah.
right?
That's crazy.
And
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was going to say there's like the comic, touching what you just said, there's the comic people who know everything. And then there's the business people who are moving into the space who don't know anything. And,
Right.
They're now, they're converging, and, they're mixing. And so out of it's going to come like this, it's coming, it's happening. But yeah, it's interesting to watch. I mean, really, we take it for granted, all of us here, because we've been doing it long enough. And, you forget that none of us, there is no school for this. There's no manual. You have to go in, you have to learn it, just the same as everybody else. You just got to live it and just go for it and just do it day in and day out for a long time. And so, it's really something much greater than just picking up a comic and reading it, or even just buying it, to pay some money for a book. It's so much deeper than that. So I think that's part of the appeal, is it's a rabbit hole, and people love to go down rabbit holes, especially something pleasurable like comics would like to do in their spare time. But then business is moving in, because obviously it's big money now, and so they're looking at this going, all right, how does this work? And and can you explain this to me? And, and then all the nerds are like, well, it goes like this. And they're like, wait,
Right.
okay, hold on. So, it's taking time, but it is, I think we're in a process of conversion right now as we speak.
Yeah. What is this is kind of one of the last things that I want to talk about tonight is it goes along with that idea, and that is that there's big money in it now, and like you said, there's groups that are kind of meshing. Is in certain areas, there's what's called as an old boy network, right? And sometimes you can't get into those areas. I know, cards, the sports card industry has a very big old boy network when it comes to distribution and trying to get into being part of it, and start a shop, this and that. Has that ever been like that in comics, and does it feel like that now?
What aspect? Collecting,
like
reading,
you like there's not necessarily like there's gatekeepers, but that in order to really succeed in a network, you have to be part of that network, if that makes sense. I don't know if that's the case now with comic books. It feels like that way sometimes with sports cards, because you're not going to be able to get the product unless you're part of that network.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays, you can go and get there's a lot of people that can open up an online retailer shop and instantly be into that network, if that makes sense.
I think I'm thinking it through what you're saying. I'm applying it to like creators, retailers, dealers, distributors. There's many facets to it, but I think for the most part, not distribution, but the playing field seems pretty level. I'm not speaking for creators; that's a different animal. But as far as everything that comes after that, anyone can open a store, anyone can set up at a show, anyone can open up a website. And to me, it's all about finding the best material and building a customer base. And really, that boils down to your access to the books and your relationships with people. And so, which really, I guess, is kind of the survival of the fittest. So, to me, in my mind, I'm not sure. The sports card thing, it's interesting, but I feel like in comics, at least on my end of things, it's a pretty everyone has a fair shot, and certainly enough time has passed now where opportunities have come and gone. Windows have opened and closed. People have established themselves at the right time, and it's things mature over time, so it becomes harder to break into things oftentimes. But these days, I mean, when it comes to collecting, if you got the books, then they'll come. It doesn't. It really very little else matters. So that's really, I think, the key, especially in this market, is having that access to supply.
I love that. I feel like over the last couple of years, we've really seen that, where we've been the comic book community has been very open to letting new people come in. And I guess my question was also, does that feel that way on the industry? Is the industry very open to letting these new people in? What do you think, Jesse?
I was just looking at numbers here. So I have 83,000 feedback on eBay, right? Never had a neutral, never had a negative. First store to 50,000 followers on Facebook. This is like 2012. I just hit 100 million views on my Google page.
Wow.
7 years ago, that would have been a big thing, right? Now it's like, cool, right? All right, whatever, right? And so when I came in, I think it was a little different story because I was kind of the cocky dude. I'm going to open up across the street from Atomic Comics. Literally, I could throw a rock and hit their store. But what you learned real fast was there were these pillars in the industry, and I don't mind mentioning their names, and that was Hibbs, right? You have Boyle, Coliseum, Joe Fields, right? These guys that had accomplished stuff that you had to look at and say, how do I be a little bit better? How do I accomplish some stuff? But also have the respect of what they had done. But as you start to peel away the onion, you start to find out that, well, there is this good old boy group, but you got this new group of guys coming in. Aaron Halen, myself, Jen King, Chris Rupp, all these younger guns coming in, still with the respect of those folks, but understanding that they weren't willing to go to that next stage. And the next stage was what was in front of you, that pivot to e-commerce and all these other things. And I remember being invited only my second year to a Diamond event, and they asked me to talk about customer service. And at the same time, I just won best customer service and best store something, whatever it was. So I'm on a high, I'm on the stage, and I'm talking about the most drastic thing possible in the comic book community, in this industry, which was customer service. I mean, that's number one in any industry you go to. But in the comic book world, no one really focused on that. And so the answer to your question was, you had this good old boy network, which is what I understand what you were asking, but we've evolved past that, the customer is now important more than the store owner's ego. And listen, when you know the backstories on some of these stores that I went out against, these guys had huge egos, and it was we never talked about customer service. And the reason why I opened up across the street for Atomic Comics is because I knew I would beat them in customer service. That was my whole goal. And so what I think you've seen is the evolution away from our history and our culture, as far as the store owners that have made names for themselves, to store owners that have made their customers the priority to make names for themselves. And then I think that's the difference between the modernized comic book store owner and the past store owner. I love them all. I talked to them all. But I also knew that in conversations I had to say, great guys, but I'm moving on. Right. And I'm not going to disrespectful. And if you don't want to do an eBay page, great. If you don't want to open up a Facebook page, great. But this is what I'm going to do. So I followed the path with this new group of exciting, progressive store owners. Me, and I was hesitant to give him, because the second I mention his name, he's going to say, well, I did the first live show an hour before you. But Shawn Hudaku is one of my closest friends in the comic book industry, and he started live streaming an hour before me, and I started an hour after him. But we had this notion that if we were worried about the past store owners and living up to their expectations versus what was the customer expecting from us, we would not be, we wouldn't be doing the show right, or I wouldn't be doing the show right now. And so I think to many, I'm the kind of the godfather of this and the godfather of that. But I need to make sure that I always move up with the next thing at hand to sell one more book, and not get trapped in that. Well, 8 years ago, I did. who cares, right? I tell people having 83,000 feedback, no neutrals, no negative. When I get my first negative, that's the only thing that's that matter. The 83,000, it's immaterial, right? And so I think this evolution of a comic book store into this new world and understanding live streaming, understanding the evolution of grading, understanding the evolution of what a key book is and the difference between a key book, right? A guy wants ROM 23 because it completes his collection. That's a key book versus the guy that wants ROM 31 because it is a $30 book. So I think we've evolved past that. I don't think it'll no longer exist. I think the breakup of Diamond kind of was that last barrier. And listen, I talk to Jeff B once a week, so I'm not afraid to say that. But I don't think we even talk. Saturday night, I was having beers with the Diamond team. I haven't been with Diamond in 7 years. You just become part of the comic book community as a cool person to hang out with and not confrontational. And I think if you follow that path, then I think you're fine. And I don't think you'll ever have to worry about the good old boys network.
Well, the reason why I bring that up, and Clutch, I'm going to end with you, because coming from, like I say, I always come from the collector perspective, but in doing these shows, I meet other collectors and other people and this and that. And one of the coolest things that I've noticed over the last 3-4 years is the camaraderie that happens between industry people, or not necessarily industry people, but just friends in the industry. Okay. If that makes sense. Like, you don't have to be in the industry. You could just be friends. And this camaraderie that happens, especially at cons, or when you don't have to see somebody every day. You see them at the con, and it's like you guys have been friends. You've been talking all the time. There's this big camaraderie that happens that I really saw over San Diego this year that was so positive that I think it's very important to key in on. And Clutch, you have made this change, to be part of this new group of retailers that are trying new things, that are doing eBay lives and whatnots and Comics Vault Live. And your reception what has your reception been like in that, because you've jumped over so quick?
Yeah, I've been very, very lucky in the fact that, like, I think I always treated other retailers with respect when I dealt with them at a publisher, and kind of carrying that through. And so now that I'm on the other side, like, I've always been able to, I think we have that mutual respect across the board, and I think that is a really important piece. I'm not the guy who's just coming in here trying to take their lunch. I'm just like, hey, I'm just trying to, as a fan, a person who loves this industry, this business, like, I just want to be a part of it in another way. And selling books is a fun way to do it. I enjoy being on that side of, like, talking to fans, and conventions were a huge part in being able to not go to all the conventions, but being able to have, basically, you have a convention in this home setup here. I'm having a little mini convention with people, 30, 50, 100 people online, and I get to talk to them and treat them with respect, and not, they're fans. They want to go up, and we want to treat down, and we all want to be together. And it's a really great, like, this community is awesome. It is one of my favorite things in the world. This and gaming and all that stuff are, like, those are the things that, like, connect me to other people. And that's the most important, especially when you've got the bad stuff of social media and all that, whatever. Being able to have a good part of a social media network and presence is this way. And it's such a benefit to my life. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. This is going to be the first show of many, and I plan on having you guys on many times on the show with many different people and talking about many situations. But I want to leave it on this. I was talking to a viewer, a fan of the show, a community member of the show the other night. And sometimes after live shows, we go and hang out in the Discord, just BS with each other. And one of the community members said, this community has saved my life so many times and it's unbelievable. Just the fact alone that in this community I can be who I am and people are okay with it, and this community found me friends, and this community, you know, I didn't feel out of place in it. That's very important. And I also think that everybody else out there needs to realize that that this community is like that. There's always bad apples. There's always, social media can be crazy these days, but the community is an amazing thing. And I think it's important to let people know that, and not only in the collector atmosphere, but also in the industry. So, and we're gonna try and show that as much as we can on the show. So again, thank you guys. I appreciate you more than you guys know. So
Thanks for having us,
good
Bryan.
stuff.
Thanks for having us on.